I think it was very fitting, the first song that was sung. No collaboration, but it ties in perfectly with what I would like to speak to you about today. So my topic this morning is Fix Your Eyes, and the scripture will be taken from Matthew 14, and it's based mainly on verses 30 to 31, but Matthew 14 verses 22 to 23, and it's the story of Jesus walking on the water. So my question to you is, have you ever been heading from point A to point B, and point B is your only focus, so much so that everything else on your journey around you, everything in your peripheral vision goes unnoticed? Has it happened to anyone? Have you ever been heading somewhere and you're just focusing on that one place that you go into, and everything else, you miss it? Not intentionally, it's just because your focus is in that place. Passers by, you don't see them. That friend that's waving, trying to catch your attention, you don't notice them. The little trip hazard that you probably just missed by an inch, you don't notice it. And they call it tunnel vision. That focus, the one thing in the center field of view, that's what your focus is on. And there are three sort of parts to what I would like to speak to you about. And first being the confident step of faith. Now, being able to step out in confidence first requires a recognition of God's presence. Now, as soon as Peter recognized Jesus walking towards them on the water, I feel like his tunnel vision kicked in, and everything else didn't matter anymore. He noticed Jesus, and he decided he was going to step out on the boat. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, if it is you," verse 28, "if it is you, command me to come." Prior to this, the disciples were out on the sea, and they were tossed all about the place. They were scared. There was a storm. The waves were raging, and they called out to Jesus for help. Like, "Lord, save me." Like, they would have wanted help. So that would be the first person. Like, usually people come into hard times or come into a difficult situation. The first person they usually call is for God to help them, to save them. And it was no different here. And at first, they didn't even know that it was Jesus. Although they called for help, they thought, "Oh my gosh, it's a ghost coming towards them." But as soon as Peter recognized Jesus, he decided, "You know what? Lord, if it is you, if it really is you that I can see, call me out to come." So the sea that he was not long afraid of, he was now convinced he could step out into. He was convinced all of a sudden that he could now do the seemingly impossible. Why? Because he recognized God. He recognized Jesus out on the sea. And for you today, God is present. You need to know that God is present in the midst of your situation. But the question is, have you recognized him yet? You need to change your perspective. Acknowledge that whenever God is present, the impossible becomes possible. At first, step out in the sea. Who's going to do that? I'm not going to choose to do that. But notice Jesus, all of a sudden, "Yeah, you know what? Call me to come. I can come." Seemed impossible, but he was able to do it. And you too can step out now. You didn't think that you'd meet the criteria to apply for that new job, that new post that came up, but you recognize the presence of God. You can step out now. You lost hope and you were weighed down by your personal situations, your issues in your personal life, thinking it will never get better, but you recognize God's presence. You can step out now. You've done all within your power to think, feel, and do better, but you've been going round and round in circles, seeing no progress, but you recognize God's presence. You can step out now. God is present in your situation, so you can step out in faith because the possibilities are endless. The impossible is now possible. Do you believe that? So recognizing the presence of God and also being able to step out in faith requires tuning out of distractions. So despite all logic and possible discouragement, I'm speculating now, but just try and cast your minds out. You think if you were in that boat now. I'm in the boat, we're all in the boat together, and I say, you know what, I'm going to step out. Someone is probably going to be like, Roxanne, do you think that's a wise decision? Mom might try and hold me back. Don't do that. Everything going around. It doesn't seem logical. Some of them may have told Peter that it was crazy, tried to pull him back, like I said. But Jesus was his point B. The disciples that he left in the boat that were once stood beside him, they were in his peripheral vision. The sea that was surrounding them, the waves, they were peripheral. I'm not focusing on that anymore. This is where I'm looking at Jesus. The mast in the boat probably broke off in the storm and fell, probably floating somewhere nearby in the sea. You can't miss it, a huge mast. But that was also probably in Peter's peripheral. Weren't focusing on that. Why? Because Peter's eyes were fixed solely on Jesus, nothing else. After he said, you know what, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come. And he said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came to Jesus. He got out and he did it. He walked on water. All of that stuff didn't matter. I'm sure he was very aware of where he was. They were not long afraid, looking at it, recognizing everything that was going on. But once he saw Jesus, he recognized Jesus, number one, and he tuned out distractions. Everything that was going on around him, he tuned it out and focused on God. And sometimes our problem is that we fail to tune out the things around us. When we're distracted, it's easier to lose sight of the end goal, the destination, the thing that we're going towards. But whatever you're facing today, tune out the things that will cause you to take your eyes off Jesus. Negative voices from family, from friends, from colleagues, resurfacing thoughts of a bad day that you probably had at work last week. The person who probably upset your spirit earlier in the day just passes by. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Forget that. Tune it out. It could be anything, whatever it is. Tune it out and keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. So the confident step of faith we see in verses 28 and 29. But then a change of events, the rise of fear. Now, as a newly qualified nurse on intensive care, there's a lot going on around me, a lot. The unit I work on is actually the largest in the UK, the largest pediatric unit. And it's pretty open plan. So although I'm one-to-one with my patient, I'm very aware of what's going on in the bed spaces beside me or around me. Ventilator beeping here, alarms going off there, a tube that a child's got in to help them breathe. They're waking up out of from their sedation, trying to pull it out. All of these things are going on. I've still got my patient, but I'm very aware of everything else that's going on. Domestic staff probably just knocked over a full bucket of water. Doctors on their way over for ward round, and I've still got tons of unfinished tasks to do. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by it all because there's so many stimulants. You've got your own stuff and then everything else that's going on, your internal and then the external. But although awareness of our surroundings is important, when we lose our focus, we make room for fear. We allow fear to rise up. And we've established already that Peter saw Jesus. He saw Jesus and he confidently stepped out of the boat. He knew what he was doing. He was aware of his surroundings, but initially it didn't faze him, it didn't worry him, but then it all changed. Verse 30, but when he saw the wind, so Peter's out on the water already, let's just get back there. He's out on the water, he's already made that step of faith. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. What happened? As he got further out, he probably started looking around more, took more notice of the sea, took more notice of the waves, probably looked down and thought, questioning, am I actually doing this? I'm actually stood on water. Peter wasn't able to walk on water because the wind and the waves suddenly disappeared. Let that be known. They were always there. It was because he placed his faith and his confidence and his trust in God. And his eyes were fixed firmly on him. But it all changed as his focus turned. So they now turned to the things around him rather than that tunnel vision. So that tube that you were once looking in, dropped that, and now everything else is back in your view. And even after you step out, you may very well still face an increased workload in your job, conflict, threatened job security, unexpected expenses that probably dent your bank account, sudden onset of sickness, whether it be yourself, a family member, or a friend. And I'm not saying to pretend that those things don't exist. They're probably very real, I'm sure they are, but don't make them your focus because you'll sink. They're happening, don't make them your focus. The wind and the waves were there, yes. Peter, I'm not saying that he should have forgotten that they were there. He was aware, but they weren't his focus initially, which is when he stepped out. We need to focus on Jesus. We need to fix our eyes on Jesus, our help. And as lovely as it would be, I must advise you that fixing your eyes on Jesus doesn't do away with the wind and the waves in your life. Just as with Peter, when Jesus said, you know what, come, he didn't say, wait a minute, wind stop, waves stop, you know what, clear away, put a nice little track out, a little pavement, Peter walked down it. He didn't do that. He said, you know what, come, as things are, come. And the same is going to be in your life. When you step out in faith, the wind and the waves of your life, the turmoil, the things that are going on that can easily distract you or take your attention away from God, they're not going to go away. But Jesus is just wanting you to focus on him. Focus on me. Don't worry about that stuff going around. Keep your eyes on me. So those stimulating factors, they'll still be there. You may still feel uneasy, feel unsure. You may feel lost. You may feel like you can't go on. But with eyes fixed firmly on him, you'll be able to continue walking even as those feelings rise. So the confident step of faith, we see the confident step of faith, then the rise of fear. When he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" He began to sink. The lifeline that we forget, we see in verse 31. So everyone knows here that me and Mom got back from our cruise last week, Monday. And during the time on the ship, I got the chance to go on a skydive simulator, which was so much fun. But before the session, we had to watch like a brief training video. And after the video, the instructor reiterated some key points. He said, if you forget everything else that you've watched in this video, remember 4 things, just these 4, and you'll be fine. Chin up, fingers apart, legs straight, and relax. They all came with hand signals, because he said once you're in the tunnel, you won't be able to speak, the rush of air, so look out for the hand signals. If all fails, remember those 4 things, and if you do forget them, look at me and I will remind you the hand signals. So you've got the one person in with you and the person who is controlling the air in the tunnel. So I had the training. I was confident. I went out there like, yes, I'm ready. I remember the points. I practiced them in my head. I even practiced the hand signals myself so I knew what they meant. I went in, the wind hit me hard, and lo and behold, I forgot 2 of them. I probably forgot them all, to be quite honest. I was just like trying to breathe. straight away, I looked to the instructor for the hand signals. And Peter was a disciple. Peter followed Jesus. He had his training. He heard the teachings of faith time and time again, not only taught to him, but as he followed and Jesus taught other people, he heard the teachings time and time again. Those signals, that training was nothing new to him. It's something that had been gone over. But as Peter felt himself sinking, when the waves and the wind probably picked up and threw him off, he looked for Jesus to help. Just like I looked straight to the instructor, what are them signals? I forgot them. Peter looked to Jesus for help, and immediately, it said, he intervened. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Then Jesus immediately intervened. Now, sometimes with us, we forget the words we once knew. We forget those scriptures that we once clung to, the things that we anchored ourselves to when we find ourselves overwhelmed by our situations and things that we're going through. But in those moments, if nothing else, it is crucial for us to remember where our help comes from, at least. If we forget those things, where can I go to for help? And here we learn that it's God. He's the person that we need to call out to. God will intervene, so we need to call out to him when we're in need. And notice here, after taking hold of him, Jesus asked Peter a question. "Oh, you of little faith, what? Why did you doubt?" Yeah, he saved him first. He didn't let him sink. He heard his cry. He held on to him, probably lifted him up from sinking. But then he said, "Why did you doubt?" And there was a lesson there for Peter. The lesson for him, and the same lesson for us, is we need to hold our faith. Because clearly, at the beginning, we said that he stepped out confidently because he had faith. He stepped out confidently in faith, recognizing God, recognizing Jesus out on the water, and tuning out all of his distractions. But he became overwhelmed by what was going on, and he began to sink, and he lost that faith. He lost that focus that he once had. We need to hold our faith. We may step out today confidently, assured, you know what, God's got me, I'm all right in this situation, I feel good, I feel stable, I feel secure, I'm not worried about everything that's going on, I'm not worried about the people that are doubting what's going to happen. But then tomorrow, something throws us off. And then that faith that we had today, tomorrow is gone. Don't doubt. Don't doubt. That experience was a lesson for Peter and should also stand as a lesson to us. So we've learned that, firstly, we can confidently step out in faith when we A, recognize God's presence in our situation, and B, tune out our distractions. We also learned that losing focus gives rise to fear. So we must actively keep our eyes fixed and focused on God. And finally, that in times of momentary forgetfulness, because it may happen, let's be honest, we might forget sometimes. The aim is not to forget, but if you do, God's hand is not too short to save you. It's not too short to save us. Do you agree? So he won't leave us to sink, but we must call out to him for help. Notice the help came after the call. Jesus, save me. Lord, save me. Jesus immediately intervened. We need to call out to God for help. May God bless his words.
I do believe that this is a very striking message to us this morning. And we can relate this message to our individual situation. What is it that I'm going through today? What is my faith like? Am I putting my trust in Jesus? All the situations around me, are they causing me to divert from what my focus is? God is reminding us this morning that we can put our faith in him. One of the things I like in that message, I love the entire message, but one of the things I like is that, yes, sometimes we forget. You know, sometimes we feel bold, we feel courageous, we forget, and yes, I believe God, I'm going to hold on. And as situation come our way, we forget. But as the messenger said this morning, call out to God. We can call out to him. Our faith in God is crucial. We're going to sing My Faith Looks Up to Thee, Thou Lamb of Calvary. We're going to sing that song, and then we're going to have a collective